Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting study session for the agenda item around Proposition 64, the implementation of recreational marijuana.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Tonight, we have a report for you on the city's outreach effort to the community, which the council directed that we undertake in order to take the pulse of the community around the implementation of Proposition 64, the Adult Recreational Use of Marijuana Act. And so tonight, we would like to present to you the findings from each of the meetings that were held in March this year to solicit input. We've invited our consultants from Muni Services to be here tonight, Jeff Colin and Larry Burkamp, who were both present at all of the sessions that we scheduled here in Daly City in March, and they provided the presentation to the community and were available to respond to questions, as well as solicited input by way of a polling kind of survey that was done at each of the meetings on several different topics related to preferences around the implementation of Prop 64. And so with that, what we'd like to do tonight is I'm going to ask Jeff, are you going to take the lead? Ask Jeff Colin to come up. I've provided you with a copy of his PowerPoint presentation so you can follow along and make notes. Jeff's going to go through what occurred in those meetings and what we learned from those meetings, and then I've asked him to outline what the next steps would be in order to frame for you the kind of direction that we need from you in order to move forward with any kind of legislative action that may be necessary if that's the direction that you give to us. And we also will be talking about the relative timelines related to any kind of action that might be required this year if the council wanted to proceed moving forward. There will not be action tonight, but we would take whatever direction that you give to us, and then we would come back in June with the necessary follow-up and lay out the various actions that would be required to move ahead if that's what the council chooses to do, either to implement Proposition 64 or if the council elected to move in the direction of banning the implementation of Prop 64 here in Daly City, then we would tell you what is necessary in order for that to occur. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you, City Manager Martell. Mayor and City Council members, it's a pleasure to be back with you this evening and provide some updates on what we've been up to for the last couple of months here.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Will you be standing all this time?
I can.
I'm just wondering, would it be more comfortable if he sat at the table? Right?
Sure.
Because I
Thank
guess.
you.
Okay. Make sure your mic is on there.
So again, thank you for inviting us back again. As City Manager Martell mentioned, during the month of March, we conducted 3 separate community meetings. The first on March 5th at the War Memorial Activity Room. We had about 15 individuals, not including staff and consultants, attend that meeting and get the PowerPoint overview on the commercial cannabis industry. You know, we went through a number of informational items and then held a voting or tabulation exercise where we put a grid up on the wall, and it had both the medicinal and the adult use business categories listed, and then allowed the participants to vote whether they strongly opposed, were neutral, or whether they supported or strongly supported a particular type of business. We also allowed them to put stickers on the wall on those to indicate their votes and to write comments on those. The second meeting was on March 13th. That was held at the Gellert Park Clubhouse. We had about 15 members, again, of the public attend that meeting. And the final one was held on March 31st at the Bayshore Community Center Gymnasium. Big room, only 7 members of the public attended. So I think, you know, the attendance was fine. I think the city did a great job of publicizing the meetings, as well as using social media to make sure the members of the public knew that they were going to be conducted and the information was going to be available. And it may be an indication that you know, there wasn't that much concern from the community about cannabis industries in the community, or it just may have been that they had other things to do on those days. As part of those workshops, we went over the history of commercial cannabis in California. We talked about the different types of state and local administrative structures and what we recommended in the way of administrative structures and processes. We showed the state license categories and fees. We talked about the state regulations that are being developed in the various departments that were part of that regulatory structure. We went over banking and the cash nature of the industry, and that one of the big challenges that the industry faces and the communities face that host the industry is that most of the business is transacted by cash because of federal restrictions on banks doing business with the cannabis industry. We worked with the city's planning department to produce a map that showed the state 600-foot radius around elementary schools and setbacks, as well as we discussed a number of options for additional buffer zones around various types of facilities and different sizes of buffer zones in addition to the 600 feet.
On page 7 of the handout that you have a copy of the map that we use, so that gives you a sense of what Jeff is referring
Yeah,
to.
and we'll show that to you in just a minute up on the screen as well. We then took a look at what surrounding jurisdictions were doing in the way of permitting or not permitting various types of the cannabis industry in the surrounding region within your county. And we talked about the various types of industries within the cannabis business models. We went through cultivation, we talked about manufacturing, we talked about dispensaries or retail sales, we talked about laboratories and testing, and gave some photo examples of what those facilities look like so that members of the public who had not had an opportunity to visit one of those types of facilities or see one in operation could get an idea of the sizes and the appearance from both the exterior and the interior of those types of businesses. We also gave an overview of the state and local tax structure. And remember that the state has a sales and use tax that applies to cannabis, as well as a number of taxable products throughout the state. Prop 64 also implemented an excise tax on cannabis, 15%, as well as cultivation taxes based on the weight of the flower or the leaf or the freshly harvested product that is being taxed. And then we spent some time talking about what are some of the city resources that may be required to regulate the industry, to monitor and collect the tax revenues, to put together the types of prevention and education programs that the community may have a desire to see if a cannabis industry is hosted in Daly City. After that presentation, we opened it up for questions and comments. And this slide just shows some, I think, representative questions and comments that we heard during those 3 public meetings. Certainly there were a number of comments that said residents should have more input than non-residents, and wait as we categorize those comments and their votes. And so you'll see a little bit later on the chart that we compiled does indicate resident and non-resident votes. There were a few people who had very strong feelings about cannabis, had either friends or family that started consuming cannabis, and they felt that it led to the use of stronger drugs, and they were very vocal about those feelings. Others were concerned about inhaling secondhand smoke or odors from businesses or individuals who were smoking cannabis. We heard concern about efforts to keep cannabis out of the hands of kids and young adults. And this is something, of course, that's prohibited by law. It's not permitted under Prop 64. It's not even permitted within the city to smoke tobacco. And so we already have regulations in place in the city to prohibit smoking of all kinds of products within the city and public spaces. Others felt that medicinal was different than adult use or recreational. They saw the need and seemed to support the need more strongly for medicinal rather than adult use. There were concerns about odors produced by cultivation, and were there systems available that could filter the air so that those odors could not be smelled from outside the facility. We explained that yes, that was the case. There were filtration systems that are available that could control those odors. Others asked, will dispensaries result in increased crime? We have not seen evidence in our experience where dispensaries resulted in increased crime. We cited those references. We did also point out that there are some crime trends related to the industry, particularly with the cash nature of the industry. And so there have been reports of robberies, follow-home burglaries and robberies, primarily associated with the cash produced by the industry. Lots of questions about how much revenue would be produced, and we provided a couple of examples from jurisdictions in California that had already permitted various types of cannabis businesses. And frankly, the range is very wide. And so it really depends on your geographic location, the geographic location of the businesses that are permitted and developed, the size of those businesses, how competitive they are with businesses in surrounding jurisdictions, to determine actually how much revenue will be produced. Others asked about, will the city be considering an equity process, and will they commission a report? And we talked about this during the presentation, that in many communities, federal drug enforcement focused, I think, more heavily on communities that had diverse populations and low income. And now that the cannabis industry is legal, should we have a program in place that would allow those same individuals in many cases to enter into legalized businesses where they may not have the financial resources to do so now. Questions about what were the next steps in the process. We explained that these were informational public meetings, that we were out not advocating for or against cannabis industries. We were collecting information in community sentiment. We're going to bring back that to the City Council, and that we're hopeful that at that point the City Council would be ready to give some direction. And that could include continuing on with a ban on all cannabis industries in the community. It could involve selecting one or more cannabis industries, either medicinal or adult use or both. It could involve allowing deliveries only into the community. And so we went over all of those range of decisions that could take place. Also, there were some in the audience, I think, that had an interest in starting businesses themselves that asked, why in the heck is it taking so long for the city to make a decision on this stuff? And as a former government official, I understand that frustration. It takes us some time to make decisions. And they weren't frustrated necessarily with Daly City alone. They felt that this was a trend that they were seeing throughout San Mateo County, with both the county and local governments within the county. Others asked, would they have to be a Daly City resident to apply for a license? And we responded that we don't know yet. We haven't heard anything from the council about an interest to restricting it to residents, and that in most communities that is not a policy that is applied. How many licenses will be issued for dispensaries? Again, we don't know yet. That's a decision that'll take place later in the process. And can cannabis be consumed in a non-licensed business? No.
So are they thinking of like a cannabis bar or something? I can't even imagine what they're thinking of.
I'm not sure what,
Yeah.
what that exact question or
was
comment
about.
was about.
Like a liquor store, or, I mean, a bar or a restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the rules and regulations about the banking for cannabis operators, has that been changed? Has there been any movement on that?
There has not been any substantial movement. We know that there are efforts and discussions underway at the state level to try to find a solution. I haven't heard of any resolution to those yet. The one thing I would say is that I think some of the fears about increased federal enforcement have been reduced. Both President Trump and Attorney General Sessions have indicated that that is not a priority currently. And so I think that has reduced some of the apprehension about that aspect of federal enforcement. Okay, the next slide, which is up on the screen already, is the vote tabulation. And as I described earlier, this is a replication of the charts we had up on the wall. On the left-hand column, we list the categories of the various types of businesses, both medicinal and adult use. So cultivation, manufacturing, testing, dispensaries, and delivery only. And then we, across the top, list the various categories of support or lack thereof. An R indicates a resident vote, an NR, a non-resident vote. And as you can see, I think the support and strongly support categories just across the board outnumbered the strongly opposed or opposed voting categories. In some cases, as much as 4 or 5 to 1.
Yeah, and even if you look at just the resident votes, if you're forgetting the non-residents, it's still, yeah, more than 2 to 1. Some places 3.
Did you break that down into the age groups of the people who were voting?
No, we did not. We didn't ask for age. The only thing we asked for was resident or non-resident status.
And so this is a
By
tabulation of all the-
guess, the majority of people that were in attendance at each of the meetings were probably under the age of 40, just by guessing. There were a couple that were older, but the majority, I would say, were probably between the ages of 20 to 40.
And just by memory, I think the strongly opposed category was made up of older residents, and in some occasions, residents with young children. Okay, so that's the summary of the workshop process and the input that we received. This next slide
I don't know.
gets to the hard part. This represents some of the decisions that are facing you as a city council in helping us and your community decide what's appropriate for Daly City. And so across the top are the categories of the various types of cannabis businesses. And we haven't broken these out yet. Well, the first question is it an authorized business or not? And so in its simplest form, that's a yes or no answer. Then the next step is, okay, let's take delivery. If delivery is yes, that's an authorized business. Is it authorized for both medical and recreation, or just one? And then the next question is, okay, so we've determined that delivery is okay. Maybe it's for municipal only. Does it require available property in the city, and is that available? And then finally is a question more for, I think, the council is, do you feel that there's community support for that type of business that's strong enough for you to move forward with an ordinance permitting that? And later on, we'll talk about some of the further steps in terms of administration and fee collection and revenue production. So let me pause here for a moment and see if there's any questions about this step in the process.
Yes, I have a few. Can you go back one slide, please, to the chart of the results? Under testing, what does that entail? Because it was a big response there that they strongly support testing. Testing and what? You can go in and try it, or?
No, this is
It's like a lab, right?
This is a category of a cannabis industry that would be, in effect, a laboratory or testing facility where small samples of the
Okay.
product would be brought in.
Got it. You made mention about the various taxes. This is on another question.
Yes.
Sales tax, excise tax. What's the minimum amount of taxes if somebody wanted to open up a business that they would have to, the minimum amount that they would have to pay?
So
Go ahead.
they would have to pay the state sales and use tax.
Right, which is about what percent?
It's about 7.75%. The only exception is if they have a state-issued medical cannabis card, and then they're exempt from that
Okay,
as a consumer.
all right.
Okay.
Oh, no, the proprietor,
Okay. So,
how much?
so the proprietor has to collect the sales tax.
Okay, all right, gotcha. So 7.75, not unless
Right.
they have a medical certificate.
Correct.
Use tax, does that come from the city?
The use tax is a state, well, let me go back. 1% or 1 cent of the state sales and use tax goes to the city. So
1%.
of that 7.75.
Got you. And the excise tax?
Excise tax was adopted with Prop 64. That's 15%.
Based on what? How much the sales price is?
Yes,
Retail sales,
retail
Retail
sales.
sales.
on
Yes,
both medicinal and recreation.
Gotcha.
So we're looking at a minimum of at least 22%.
correct.
Not counting-
Plus,
Plus,
Yeah, now we've got
plus
the,
there's a weight-based cultivation tax.
that the cultivators will, of course, pass
The
on
cult-
to
the
the
cultivators pay
distributors
that,
and the retail.
through the
yeah.
distributors.
Right.
But to the consumer, that's also a cost.
jeez.
So you're up in the 28% range in total tax burden.
So Okay, so if you buy $100 worth of product, you're gonna be paying $28.
Correct.
For taxes. And the city's only gonna get 1%.
That's correct.
Unless they add an additional tax on it.
Gotcha. All right.
So the city has two possible sources of revenue associated with these types of businesses. The first of those are administrative fees or cost recovery fees. Those are the same kinds of application fees and business license fees that you can assess on any type of business within your
Okay.
jurisdiction.
That's
Those
what,
generally
1.5%.
only recover your costs.
Okay.
The second option that you have is to get a voter-approved excise tax adopted. And if you'll recall, we also laid out some models for how those are applied to various types of cannabis industry. Some of those are based on gross sales. Others are based on a square footage basis. You can also levy them on the weight of the product cultivated. We don't recommend that, but yeah.
Okay.
Gross sales is easiest to.
All right, thank you. I have more questions, but I'm going to wait because I want to talk about buffer zones, but you stopped prior to getting to that point.
Yeah.
So,
And I can put that slide up next. if you-
well, I'll wait in case other
Yeah.
council members have questions prior to that.
Does anyone else have any other questions? I do have one. You mentioned the delivery, and you said you'll go into kind of administration and how, well, if there were to be a delivery business, how would that account for fees? Is it if it's delivered in Daly City or?
So
I mean,
there's.
or the delivery business is in Daly City? I'm trying to.
So there's two options that you have. You could say, we are going to allow delivery-based businesses to locate in Daly City and deliver cannabis products to both our residents and residents or outside of our jurisdiction. That's one option. The second option would be to say, no, we're not going to have any brick and mortar building or facility for the sale or delivery of cannabis in our jurisdiction. However, we will allow it to be delivered from outside of our community to consumers in our city. You can,
Do a point of sales tax?
you could do a permit
Could do
and
that.
establish an annual fee for the permit. It is more difficult
Yeah.
to collect a point of sale based
Yeah,
type of
especially
application.
when everything's cash.
Correct.
Kind of hard to keep track of it.
Not impossible, more difficult and costly to administer.
Thank you.
Okay, the next slide we have shows the 600-foot radius. Those are indicated in green. And I
The
believe
dark green or the light green, or all of the green?
the dark green is the actual shape of the facility
Ah,
that's covered under state law. And then the lighter green shows the application of the 600-foot radius around that facility. And as you can see, this excludes quite a bit of the area within the city. The salmon or pink colored area, I believe, are your commercial zones.
it's so small and so much is covered up, it's kind of hard to tell what's what. Can you show us a little bit, or maybe Pat
I'm
can?
not as good about the local geography here. Maybe
So,
Maybe we start at the top there?
so at the very top, we're talking about that John Daly Boulevard.
The
and that-
horizontal there, right, or kind of
Yeah,
diagonally?
right there. So this would be around John Daly Boulevard.
Uh-huh.
This would be out Bayshore area.
Where's Mission Street?
This would be
Mission?
Mission Street right
Okay.
here. This would be down in this Saramani kind of
Shopping
area.
center.
Yeah. This would be like around King Plaza, that area. And that would be Westlake. Does that give you
Okay,
better
got it.
orientation? Now, it's limited because of the 600-foot radius, so in each of those areas, there's much more commercial, but particularly, oops, sorry, Jeff didn't mean to poke that in your eye.
Blinded the consultant.
He's going to look down.
You know, we have the schools, we have churches, we have a lot of things that are within those, that 600-foot radius in many of the commercial districts. So that's what limits the locations that.
Is that delineated on there? Is it delineated on there where those sites are?
Are, the various colors are delineated right here. You have it in
Yeah.
front of you, so that tells
Yeah.
you what each of those areas are. So,
Can somebody read
The
them?
chart is
We can't-
extremely small
we
on
can't
our,
read
if you look at it, there's no way to
So
read
light green
that.
means it's the 600 feet,
yeah,
right? The dark green means it's the actual building itself, or the schoolyard, the property. So it would be like the whole school yard and buildings. And then the pink is the commercial area,
right.
but what is it around? What are the sensitive areas?
Exactly.
What is that list? Schools, all
That's what
kinds of
I'm
schools,
asking.
private,
Schools.
public?
School, I'll say, we put them on the list. We
Yeah.
put, schools, parks, and daycare facilities. So those were the uses that were in the state regulations that we
Oh.
identified. So we didn't.
So say it again, it's all schools.
All schools, daycare facilities, preschools, and parks.
And parks.
Parks.
I don't think too many daycare kids are gonna be trying to toke up, but. Okay, parks,
But is that notated on this map? Those schools, the parks on,
No, we didn't make a list of what those are, and that could be provided. We took a very conservative interpretation of the state code. The state code didn't give a very specific list of uses, it just said schools and uses that serve children.
We certainly could
yeah.
take this map and we
Yeah,
could tell
yeah,
you
could
which
list
parks
them.
and
I can see
schools are in all
Marchbank
those
Park on
locations.
there 'cause of the
Because
shape
it's just
of
a
it.
Daly City map, so we know which one of the schools and
Yeah.
daycare centers and each of those facilities are.
and actually that main line that you said was Mission Street is actually the freeway
The
in
freeway
Juniper
is
there.
in the
Because I
middle.
can see Marchbank Park and Jefferson High School there.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
up
and
here.
Mission is over there, yeah.
Right
yeah.
here, this is Mission.
Yeah.
And it's you see all that green because of the high school, because there's a
Yeah.
daycare facility there,
And then, yeah.
park, yeah.
So as you move forward, you're gonna definitely break that down in very different areas.
Right, yeah. If it just had a few streets on it, I think it'd be easier for all of us to see where we are, but, yeah.
So one of the challenges that arises when you look at this map is then ensuring that if the council made a decision that you were interested in moving forward, is identifying the distribution of these kinds of retail outlets around the community and to ensure that they're not concentrated in any particular location. And, you know, there are areas that have more of the green because there are more, there's schools, daycare, other things that limit the number of locations that would make it appropriate. There's other areas where there's much more commercial that potentially could cite those locations, but then the question is, do you really want to concentrate that kind of activity with more than one retail outlet in those particular areas? So those would be some of the questions that you'd have to ask going forward.
I know that certainly the concern of the people in my neighborhood, which is east of the freeway, and the poorer side of town, is if the city goes ahead and decides to have dispensaries, we'll do our fair share, but we are not taking the brunt of the burden. So we'll take the number 2 dispensary, the second one, not the first one. And I look at all those other neighborhoods, looks like there's plenty of room in other places. They can have the first and the third, or however many the council or the community decides they want to have. But I know that there's, even among people who totally support having dispensaries in Daly City, they don't want them targeted for the poorest neighborhoods in Daly City. That goes for the Bay Shore, too. Quite a few people there actually support having one, but not just there and not just on Mission Street.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Christensen. There are different socioeconomic areas within Daly City. I just want to mention that I think, I grew up in the area that you've mentioned, and I think there's ways to describe the neighborhoods. And so I just want to let you know that describing neighborhoods as poor or not poor, there's definitely different socioeconomic areas within Daly City.
I have a question, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
Regarding the potential for revenue for Daly City, I would be interested in learning or getting some kind of breakdown as to, with respect to the categories that were listed, for example, cultivation or delivery or dispensary, manufacturing. I'd like to know what is the breakdown in terms of the potential for revenue. What's the most generating to what's the least generating, so I can have an idea of where, when we try to make the determination of where do we balance revenue versus some of the good and bad of opening up some of these categories in our city. I'm interested in knowing that breakdown.
We certainly can provide that. It would be very difficult, if not impossible, to have manufacturing and cultivation in Daly City because we really don't have
The space.
the space for it.
We don't have the land or
So
the
really,
sun.
when you look at the various options, we could tell you what potentially the kind of revenue, but the likelihood that we would be able to locate any of those kinds of activities in Daly City, other than probably retail, is very, very minimal. I mean, unlikely that you could have any other kind of distribution other than retail.
So we can pretty much cross out manufacturing and cultivation?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
And unless there are cultivation facilities or manufacturing facilities within close proximity to Daly City, it's unlikely that a testing lab would be in great
Right,
demand.
the testing lab as well.
So we can cross that out too, the testing. Okay.
And it's likely, well, I don't know. I was going to say it's likely that those activities might have higher revenue generation.
Certainly the manufacturing aspect, I think, has the highest potential for revenue. It also has unique space requirements and size of space requirements to produce those revenues. And depending on the size of the cultivation and type of facility, it also can sometimes be a significant revenue producer as well. Testing labs, generally not a great source of revenue. And retail, we've talked about that a little bit. There's a great deal of variability, a wide range of revenues that we see coming in from various types of retail businesses. Depends on the types of products that they are selling, their location, the marketing that they do, the experience
Access
of the
to
business owners,
transportation.
access to transportation, and whether they can be successful in drawing in customers from outside the local jurisdiction.
Let me go back to the manufacturing and cultivation issue. The manufacturing, and I'm just trying to educate myself on how this is done. Can the manufacturing be done in a closed sort of warehouse environment where nothing can be seen?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
That's where it generally happens.
okay. So if we had the space, this could happen, the opening up a huge warehouse and nobody knows it's there. or
But they're
what's
not
going-
growing stuff in it.
Yeah, they're just,
Correct.
They're just processing it.
Yeah.
They bring it from some other place where it's cultivated, and then they process and package it.
Now,
There
in,
are a number of different types of manufacturing also from the extraction process, which a lot of people think of as manufacturing, where they're taking
Right.
trim. Where they're taking the trim product and extracting the oils, but there's also manufacturing where they're taking the oil from an extraction
Right.
process and then manufacturing the edibles or the juices or the other types of products or the vapes and those type of things. So there's various different sizes of manufacturing, from the very large extraction type to the smaller, more boutique type, making edibles or
where they're
chocolates
making
or
them
those
into
type of things.
little
Or
gummy worms or
well,
whatever.
they can't do that anymore because they can't make candy, but they can make chocolates or
Whatever,
they can make
yeah.
baked goods.
But an
and
oral,
the oral,
rather than
the
smoking,
oils and
yeah.
those type of things. And so manufacturing is maturing as the industry matures, so there could be some smaller boutique type manufacturings that could fit into a smaller manufacturing space than a large extraction type thing. So that's,
what kind of space are we talking about, do you think?
I think that the one in Santa Rosa, I think was 135,000 square feet or something like that, a very large manufacturing, but it's also located in a semi-industrial area, so from the outside, there's no indication that it's operating until you actually, and even when you walk through the doors, which are secured, there's no indication until you actually get into the back rooms of it where you're actually seeing the processes. But it could come down to a small facility, even this size for a small boutique type operation who's making just a small, one of the areas within that larger complex was a room this size where they were basically doing infused chocolates and edible type products in a separate location.
And that would fall under manufacturing.
Yeah, that would fall under manufacturing, yes.
And currently in Daly City, the available locations, depending upon the size, the likelihood is that it would be located in the Bay Shore area, in that light industrial area that we have off of Geneva Avenue. And there's very limited warehousing now, but that would be the location where that kind of space would be available.
Okay, the next slide, and our final slide, is if the council decided to move forward and authorize some or any of the commercial cannabis business licenses, and you wanted to issue those licenses by January 1 of 2019, this is a very, very preliminary calendar. And we put all kinds of qualifications on that we did our best to establish a preliminary calendar, and it'd be subject to working with you, the council, and your staff, and your city attorney to come up with a final schedule and craft the next necessary regulations and ordinances. But the initial step in determining the number and types of businesses, taking a look at your zoning maps, and that would include the buffer zones. So going back to City Manager Martell's comments about determining where and how many is an important step in the process. And then that would give us enough information to begin to draft ordinances and regulations for those business types, and to provide you with some recommendations for how to control their location and their numbers and their proximity to each other. Then we would complete a resource study. This is sometimes called a cost recovery study, where we look at the cost of administering a commercial cannabis program that the city would incur, and then develop recommendations for fees to recover those costs. Then we would come to you with a discussion around tax and fee policies. Do you want full cost recovery fees, or do you want to make it easier for the businesses to establish in your community? Do you want to adopt an excise tax in addition to those many, local and state taxes that are already there? And if so, what would that tax rate be? And we talked a little bit about some of the options around those kinds of taxes. If you do decide to go forward with a tax, then we have some deadlines we have to meet in order to qualify those for the November ballot.
And that particular issue is an important one, which is why tonight we really wanted to solicit some direction about how we should begin to proceed for you, because assuming the August 10th deadline for filing the necessary language, ballot language for a cannabis ballot measure on the November ballot, between now and August 10th, you have 4 regularly scheduled council meetings to take action. June 11th and 25th and July 9th and 23rd, because you would have to have it approved and ready to go by August 10th. So it would have to be in July that you would take final action. So you're really not, you're talking about a couple of months in order to get everything, lined up, at least for the ballot measure. And that would require working on all of the items that are listed there, the things that are subsequent to the ballot measure. You don't have to worry about as much, but the things that you have to get ready to put on the ballot would be the most important things that the staff needs to get direction on as soon as possible to begin to craft all of that language and get things ready before that August 10th deadline.
So following that decision about the ballot measure and developing the language, then we have some time to develop an application process. And this is something that, depending on the type of business, you'd want specific questions and information provided by the applicant in order to determine their qualifications, know where their proposed location is, whether they have ownership or permission from the landowner to host a cannabis-oriented business at that location. We're going to do a criminal background check on those applicants, as well as a financial background check on those applicants. All of those kinds of things would be covered in an application process. We also recommend that you develop an objective and merit-based selection process. Why do we recommend that? Oftentimes we'll see cities say, we only want 2 dispensaries in our community, okay? And that's fine.
Which do.
But you get 10 applications.
Yep.
And unless you've developed an objective merit-based selection process,
Prior.
you're going to have to back up and do that if you get
Ooh,
those 10.
that sounds like lawsuit time.
That's what we want to avoid.
Yeah.
And then following that, we'll need a month or so to begin the administration of the selection process, to go ahead and do all those background investigations, in-person interviews, on-site inspections, and complete the selection process and make recommendations back to the council for those permits that should be awarded. So we've given you a lot of information tonight. I know what it feels like to sit in your chairs and be at this point in the meeting. So at this point, I think we'll turn it back over to Pat and the staff to kind of lead you through these decisions this evening. And of course, Larry and I are available for any questions that you have about any of the information we've shared with you tonight or any of the other public sessions we've conducted.
Thank you very much. Any more questions, Councilmember Sylvester?
Yes. Okay, as I made mention before, when we got to the maps, I had some questions on the buffer zones. I heard from,
Can we go back? No. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go.
as a city, do we have to accommodate what state is recommending as a 600-foot buffer zone? Can we increase it to 1,000?
Yes, you have the flexibility as a local jurisdiction to incorporate larger buffer zones.
Okay.
The note of caution that I'd give to you at this point is you can see those green, blobs on the map. And if you extend it another 400 feet, say, to 1,000 feet, you're not going to have very much of that pink or salmon colored left in your city.
Well, what I'm hearing is the pink or salmon represents where these locations can be established because they're identified as retail areas presently?
Commercial, yes.
Okay. Also heard through the state that this map represents protected areas such as churches and schools.
Not church.
Not churches, only
I mean-
schools. Schools, child development centers, parks.
Can we modify the ordinance to include churches, banks?
You can. You have that flexibility as a local jurisdiction.
Thank you. On the map, I would like to see an overlay of transit routes into Daly City to include BART and Samtrans routes. And lastly, there's talk of putting together a ballot. Now, a ballot would go out to the voters of Daly City based upon what the council decides as recommendations. What if the voters of Daly City say no? Then even though it's state law that the voters throughout the state already approved Prop 64, we as a city can say, based upon the votes from our residents, that we will not have a cannabis outlet recreation recreation or medical use, then we will be okay.
Yes, you
Okay.
can ban it, but
Okay.
it doesn't mean that people can't use it, that they can't buy it
Oh, yeah,
elsewhere.
well, I know
They
that.
could not have it delivered. It's just that
Gotcha.
you would not want to have retail outlets
Gotcha.
in the city. You could do that.
Right, because we have
Just
the
as a-
land use
just as a
control,
point of
but not the
clarification.
law. Yeah.
That would not require that you place anything on the ballot.
Right.
Yeah.
The city council has that authority to implement a more permanent ban on the cannabis industry just through a legislative action that
Right.
you could take.
Okay.
And that's one of the options in terms of direction that we're going to be soliciting from you, that that's one of your choices. You can say, nope, I'm not convinced, and I want to think about banning it completely. And then we wouldn't go to the voters. But you could get a negative vote at the ballot box, and that would give you the message that banning it is what
People want.
people would want.
Thank you.
I know I had talked to the city attorney earlier about, I'm very uncomfortable with 4 or 5 people making this decision for the entire city. So could we craft a ballot measure that would say, yes, we want dispensaries, we could even have a number of them, or no, we don't want however you want to word it. It's probably best in the affirmative so that people can understand what a yes is. Yes is for the dispensaries and no is for no dispensaries. That we would craft in that language however many, we'd put a limit on however many, or unlimited, whatever the council would decide. And list the types of businesses, and we could include the amount of local sales tax and have have it all in one measure that people would, the community would either vote yes or no on. And then we'd really know the feelings of our community. I know that at those meetings, that a lot of those people were interested in the business themselves, so, and we had non-residents there in a fairly large number and not very many residents. So what do our people believe?
Do we have a analysis? I know this went to the voters in the past in San Mateo County, and do we have an analysis of what the voters in Daly City specifically? I'm sure we could get that data, right?
So are you talking about the statewide ballot?
Yes.
How, well, we actually showed that to you in the first
Yes.
presentation. I think it
Yeah.
was 56%?
I don't recall the exact percentage. We can look that up for you and
Okay.
get it.
I think
It
it was
was approved.
56%. It wasn't a huge majority, but it
But
was
it
a
was-
majority.
yeah.
Okay.
But we can get that information.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, Councilmember Christensen, yes, you could craft that type of combined ballot measure that would say, shall the city of Daly City adopt up to a 10% excise tax on cannabis industries and permit up to 3 retail dispensaries or 3 medicinal dispensaries, however you wanted to
word it.
incorporate the language. I think essentially what you would be doing then is putting it to the voters to determine, do they want dispensaries
Or not,
in the city
yeah.
or not?
Yeah.
If they don't, then the tax would fail as well.
Right. And so we would still have to do all those, we'd have to do a lot of work to determine what it is we would want to include in that ballot measure. We want to give people the opportunity to vote, but we also want to have something defined enough so that whichever way they vote, we know what it is that they actually want.
So I think my feeling on this is that, the state law which was passed allows for the use of cannabis. And we, as the council, have a certain amount of authority, legislative authority, to implement whatever we think is in the best interest of the city. So I'm not sure that, for example, I'm not sure we should ask the voters to limit the number of dispensaries. Because I think as time goes on, things change and we might decide to have more because of the success of it, because it's perhaps something that the community really wants and it benefits the community. So I'm not sure that we should put limits on our ability to regulate as a council what is already the state law, which is people can use cannabis. I guess my question is with respect to the retail or the dispensaries of it, is that something that we as a council can do without a vote of the
Yes.
people? Okay.
yeah.
The council can establish the ordinance that allows for the citing of retail establishments.
Okay.
It would be all of the tax-related
Yeah,
increases associated with that
yeah.
that the voters would have to approve.
Yeah, so my feeling is that I think because the state law is the law, that I think if we do a ballot measure, it should just be on what kind of tax rate we want to implement to get the best amount of revenue for our city. And I think it's cleaner that way. I think it, we've already done this, clearly over 56% of the voters approve of the use of cannabis. The polling or the study that you guys have done, the community outreach, already is compelling that the numbers were that for the most of the participants, they want it. So that's my thought. I think the ballot measure should just focus on how much we are to gain, what rate we are to use, and that's it.
I'd like to also, I know this is an analysis around, our community outreach, and I thank you for taking the time and, reaching out to community members and providing us the data. But I'd also like to know kind of, as time progressed, I'm sure that there have been changes around jurisdictions around us and within the county or the Bay Area. And can we get what is the updated ordinances within other jurisdictions?
I think we're having an earthquake.
Yep.
Yes, we are. Okay. It's
Just a little one.
It's actually a volcano.
None of us did
Not
what
too
we're
bad.
supposed to do,
I
back
know.
under the table.
Moving on. Moving on, that was just a minor one.
if we do,
Californians.
yeah.
Never seen the screen move like that before.
That was definitely an earthquake.
So we can provide information about cities that have approved ordinances, yes.
I appreciate that.
And Pacifica, I think, is our
The closest one, yeah.
It is the closest. I mean, I'm sure there's other
It is for
comparable
medicinal outlets.
Yeah.
And
But
it-
as far as,
it will-
I just like to see a gamut, not necessarily just the closest cities to us of, what has been proposed. And then for me, I think, that's why I wanted to know the statistics on what the voters' actual percentage was when this was brought to them. And it was, passed through state, and in Daly City is 56%. And for me, I think if we were to move forward with any ballot measure, it would be finding as mentioned by the vice mayor, the right amount that would benefit our city, but at the same time, these are going to be local businesses, so that there's a balance and finding that right number. So.
So if you're going to get information from other cities, maybe take some of Councilmember Sylvester's questions and kind of combine that. He wanted to see an overlay of the transit routes, but also to analyze some of those nearby operations, what their transit routes look like. So we can sort of do a apples to apples comparison of, have they been successful? Because it sounds like we've got some support here for dealing with the tax aspect of it, but, and some positive about going forward in that direction. But I think we want to definitely, if you're looking at tax money, we want to definitely see the success of these businesses and what, where they were located, anything else that it affected their success, to see if we have that here or not. I still think we should go to the voters over it, but.
Well, my guess is that we probably, we could probably get you, I know we could get the information about other jurisdictions who have approved ordinances. Whether or
Yeah.
not we could have sufficient data about how successful they've been today.
Yeah.
Not sure that there's
They
going to be
haven't been
enough
around
data
long
to,
enough. Yeah.
to provide anything meaningful to you.
Yeah. That's probably true.
Except for medicinal dispensaries,
Right.
you might be able to, but not for purely retail under Prop 64. There's just not been enough time to be able to tell you that.
And even with the state sales and use tax, unless there are 3 or more outlets in the same retail category, we cannot
nothing.
share the
Oh.
sales tax data.
Information, huh?
Correct.
Ah, didn't know that.
So there needs to be at least 3.
Yeah, sales tax information is proprietary and
Correct.
Because if it's any less than 3, then you can figure out how much money people are making on an
Yes.
individual basis.
That's correct. And
Yeah, okay, I get it.
If I can make a final note, that's information, I kind of agree with some of what my colleagues are saying. I'm in firm belief that if the voters pass the initiative, then they want it. But at the same time, we as a council have to be aware of what our actual community wants. Again, as the mayor said, this was a start in performing community outreach, and this helps us and guides us to make the decision. Now, the reason why I'd ask for the transit routes, because I'm thinking of public safety also, and, crimes are perpetrated or could be perpetrated at these locations if they have access to transit, or if they want to come into Daly City and buy, then get on transit and go back. I'm looking at public safety as a matter, and it should not be, even though we need the money, it should not be solely upon how much we're going to make out of this by allowing something that a lot of folks may not even want. So, again, it'll be a balancing and weighing scale to look at it, and to have all the information that we can possibly get, that would be great.
Well, I think the one statement that you just made is an absolute truism, Councilmember, because I think our consultants were very direct with you in the very first presentation that they made about the entire process of implementation. And that is that no city should be undertaking this as a revenue-generating activity.
Right.
There may be some revenue that is generated in excess of the cost of administering these programs and providing public safety. But if we're looking at this kind of activity as solving our structural budget deficit, it's not going to do that. And we should not be approaching it that way. One of the things we did emphasize, though, and so in terms of increasing the tax associated with this kind of activity, what we talked to those who were at the meetings, the informational meetings about, was that the voters of Daly City should expect that if the council does approve the locating of retail establishments like this, that it should not have an impact on tax revenue that is generated for community services. It should be revenue that is generated above and beyond that. And everyone at those meetings was very much in agreement that this should not in any way be impacting the city's existing revenues, and recognizing that our existing revenues are falling short of what we would like them to be. So if you are going to pursue this, then raising the necessary tax revenue to support the administration of this program is very important. But counting on that on an annual basis is producing a huge amount of revenue that's going to help support additional services. It may or may not happen. So based on what I have heard in the notes I've taken, we can certainly come back at the next meeting and provide you with the details that you've asked about. Is there anything else that you would like us to be able to produce to assist with your deliberations at a future meeting about the direction that you'd like to move in? And I guess I want to make sure that I've heard from at least 4 of you tonight that there is an interest in proceeding forward with at least gathering information that would be required if you were to provide direction to staff that moving ahead with implementation of retail establishments in Daly City is what you are interested in doing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think we
Yes.
definitely need more information.
So I'm not hearing anyone say no. I'm hearing a majority say yes.
Yes.
Okay, just want to.
And we need more information before we make a final
Oh, absolutely.
decision.
That doesn't mean you've acted. I'm just
Yeah.
wanting to make sure that I'm getting it correctly, that there is a majority vote here, or direction, rather, majority direction to
gather
move
more
ahead.
information, yeah. And
Right.
I'm not convinced that, that I support the churches and banks idea of adding them to it, but I think we should look at it. And I don't know if you guys had any additional or feelings about the sensitive sites.
It's a good point. So Mr. Cole and I were just chatting, and one of the things he raised is something that you may want to consider. And if you want us to get additional information, we can. But this would be an opportunity for you to also consider that even though we've had a moratorium or a ban in the past for medicinal dispensaries, do you want to consider medicinal dispensaries in addition to retail adult recreational use?
Usually the way, I think the more conservative approach would be medicinal only. And then if you wanted a broader policy, would be to open it to adult use and medicinal use dispensaries.
I'd like to give, well, my feeling is top priority to medicinal use. I am no physician, and if a doctor prescribes the use of cannabis for his or her patient, who am I to say that they should not do so? So I would say at a minimum, a higher priority for me would be the medicinal use.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I would like to see the analysis of what I asked for earlier around other jurisdictions, around what was medicinal and recreational. I need that information. Thank you.
I would like to see the I don't know, the some of the high-end ones that are opening up in San Francisco, I'd like to get a sense of what they're like, and so.
Are you suggesting a
Re-
field?
Well, I mean,
Well, we have done that in the past. If you
Okay.
wanted to do a field trip, we could arrange that.
I mean, maybe because what I've heard is that there are
We did
some
it to the
really
medicinal dispensaries.
nice ones that look very modern, very clean, and I would like to actually see something, and so it'll help me make the decision. So maybe some kind of presentation, or maybe a field trip is in order. I don't know. You'll come with us?
Well, when the council did consider medicinal dispensaries, we actually did, the city attorney and I did take a field trip with a couple of the council members to look at a couple of the facilities, to see the kind of security they have,
Right.
the kind of store use of the product, what kinds of products they sold, other, edibles and other kinds of cannabis oil products. And so we did visit a couple of dispensaries in San Francisco in order to have a better understanding of what these facilities would be like and what they would look like from the outside if the public were
Yeah.
walking by.
Absolutely.
So
And
we could certainly do that.
I'd say that most of those started as medicinal dispensaries and now have converted or added adult use permits and now operate as both medicinal and adult use retail outlets. And we'd be happy to work with the city to arrange those tours. We've done that for several different city jurisdictions and visited a variety of cannabis industry categories and examples. And
Yeah, one of the other things we point out to cities as they move forward is that your ordinances, if you move forward, should be flexible and broad enough to take into consideration the change that's going to happen in the industry over the years, so you're not tied within, your hands aren't tied initially, so you can actually modify and revise your regulations as you move forward to address any impacts, either positive or negative, as the industry grows. So that's something we encourage, so you don't have to make a decision now and then be stuck with it forever, that you have some flexibility within that ordinance and regulations.
Right, okay.
All right.
Any other feedback?
No. Amen.
Okay, so we will plan to come back in June with this additional information and an opportunity for the council to have some discussion about it. And if we'll agendize it with potential action, if the council decides at that time that you still want to deliberate further, then we can continue the item at that time, but we'll agendize it in a way that if you wanted to take action and give direction to staff, you could do so.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martell, and thank you, Mr. Colon and Mr. Burkamp.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This is now adjourned.